We are live on Proline TV, the Lads Football Network for this Friday, July 18th, 2025. We are just days, well, actually, I think we are just 24 hours away. I know the Jets are starting training camp. I think there's already another training camp or two underway, but the Cowboys are coming soon. And this is a great opportunity as ever to bring in RJ Ochoa from bloggingtheboys.com. He's editor-in-chief. He's been with us for the past few years. He was just with us couple of months ago, just talking about what's going on with the Cowboys as usual, and he's back once again. How's it going, RJ?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to, not that I don't in the off season, but perusing y'all's website each and every single day for the next 6 months. It's that time of year.
Yes, it is. And we will definitely be popping up the Lads depth chart here in just a couple of minutes as we go through the depth chart and find out what's going on with the Cowboys. Okay, so let's get into, I guess, the biggest story going on still for Dallas, and that is Micah Parsons and his contract extension. What's the latest?
Well, we're chatting on Friday, July 18th. The Cowboys report to Oxnard on Sunday, and Micah still does not have a contract extension. This is obviously very familiar territory for everyone because of how the Cowboys are covered and discussed. Exact same situation that Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb were entering last year. Dak has entered that situation before. I mean, we could sit here for hours on end. Micah, I mean, the important facts, I suppose, are that Micah first became eligible for a contract extension last year. And so they burned all of 2024, which was the ideal time to do this from an efficiency standpoint. But, they burned it because they were chasing Dak and CeeDee, who they could and should have done in 2023, but obviously did not. And we are chatting not even 24 hours after the Pittsburgh Steelers gave TJ Watt a deal, a record-breaking contract extension. The important figures are that he's making $41 million per year, $108 million fully guaranteed. If you recall, the offseason began with Myles Garrett getting a contract extension from the Browns after threatening that he wanted to be traded. I mean, the point is that like with Dak, like with CeeDee, like with Dak the time before, by waiting and dragging their feet, the Cowboys have seen the market rise. Now, Micah has pledged to report to camp. He was a part of all offseason activities and did a small sort of hold in, didn't do all of the physical activities. And so that's kind of the big question, whether or not he will actively participate in training camp. Maybe he'll do the things that don't require pads and helmets or whatever. I mean, obviously, people have approached that situation differently, but amazingly, on Thursday, the 17th, an interview that Micah did with The Undertaker, of all people, this is the Dallas Cowboys, if that's not obvious, came out that I believe was recorded a few weeks ago, but he noted that he was ready to get it done last year, and he doesn't understand, like all of us, why the Cowboys dragged this out, and that it makes it more frustrating. So, par for the course as we get set for training camp to begin.
When did all of it? Has Jerry always operated this way, or was there a point somewhere in his ownership that he changed?
I think that there are two important inflection points to answer that question. One is in 2000. First of all, they're both post the 2011 CBA. I think that changed an enormous amount of things in this kind of realm for the NFL at large, just because it was the introduction of the rookie wage scale. But in 2012, the Cowboys spent big, so to speak, in free agency by signing Brandon Carr, a cornerback who was very good for them, just wasn't prime Deion Sanders. And that was also the same year they traded up in the NFL draft to draft Morris Claiborne at number 6 overall. And again, just didn't become Darrelle Revis. And so they viewed it as this failure. And so they've been spooked by free agency ever since that Brandon Carr deal and not being willing to hand out these big, massive deals. And again, that was 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Yet they still carry this reputation of like big spenders, Cowboys, whatever. But I would offer this specific thing, dragging it out with players. If there was kind of a Trojan horse or there was a trailblazer, it was probably DeMarcus Lawrence. They franchise tagged him in 2000, what would have been 17, 18, and he played on the tag, and he called their bluff and had a great season, and so they had to kind of cave, and he was the first person. He was the Kirk Cousins of the Cowboys, I suppose is the best way to put it, who really took things the distance. And shortly after that, Zeke Elliott was up for his contract extension, and he very famously held out, went to Mexico, all that stuff. And then they really, took this to an entirely different level in 2019 by not getting things done with Dak Prescott. And that came at a time when the Rams got a deal done with Jared Goff and the Eagles got a deal done with Carson Wentz. And it made all the sense in the world to get something done with Dak, and they didn't. And so they let him play out the final year of his rookie deal. They tagged him, let him play out the tag year, and he shattered his ankle. And still, even in the offseason after, got the biggest contract in NFL history. And they've just been kind of borrowing from the future over and over and over again ever since then. So it was really DeMarcus Lawrence who proved that if you're willing to call their bluff, the front office will eventually cave and meet your demands.
Yeah, and of course, what happens off the field is a big representation of what happens on the field, and that's why the Cowboys are just stuck in this, zone of just mediocrity in a way, even though they have had decent seasons lately, but they've moved on, and Brian Schottenheimer is now taking over. So this will be his first training camp ever as a head coach. So how is that as far as is there any excitement for that as far as the fan base, the team, or is it just, it's new, so anything new is exciting?
I know you and I have talked about this. The initial moments after they hired Schottenheimer were really dark. I mean, I've been doing this professionally for a decade. I've been a fan of this team my whole life, and it was never that bad. I know we speak in hyperbole a lot. I mean, it truly was, when they announced it on a Friday night, like at 9 p.m. and that, 2 weeks was grim. And if you recall, in his introductory press conference, Stephen Jones even used air quotes and said this drought that people say we're in, talking about the Cowboys Super Bowl drought, which was incredibly tone deaf and also literally inaccurate. I mean, just, as if the drought didn't exist. But so, I mean, temperature was really high. And then I'd say the first thing that kind of changed or started to massage things for people was the combine. Schottenheimer had a chance to speak and kind of be his own man, be the head coach. And, it's kind of a captivating person. And notably, as you know, Jerry Jones doesn't speak at the combine the way standard general managers do. He doesn't take to the podium, but he does hold court on his bus in Indianapolis. And he did not do that. Which was strange and certainly out of character, and allowed Brian Schottenheimer to kind of be the only person who spoke on behalf of the team. And so that was, again, nobody is foolish enough to say things are really changing. That's not the presentation I want to have come across. But little by little, Schottenheimer has had moments to kind of speak and offer a little bit more of his personality. And I think people are bought in on that. Now, that's just one tiny part of this whole thing, because from a football standpoint, we still have no idea who this man is. I mean, he's going to be the offensive play caller, and he's been the offensive coordinator for 2 years without being the play caller. So there's a little bit of the newness that you talked about, a little bit of the natural curiosity that's kind of accompanying his kind of whole aura. But I think he's charming enough to where people are willing to give him a chance. And last year was so toxic that, training camp attendance was very infamously lower than usual. That was a national story as well. So I think people are calloused, and people are saying to themselves, like, I don't really expect much here, but I'm at least, willing to make this a part of my life again and just enjoy the ride. Okay. I know what's going to happen. I know we're going to dip and, we're going to turn and the dinosaur is going to poke its head out at the end, but I'll stand in line for 20 minutes anyway, and then afterwards I'll buy the picture where we're all screaming going downhill.
Okay. Nice way to put it. Was Mike McCarthy part of that as far as the overall mood? And now that it's changed and it's a new coach and it's a new way of thinking, do you think that is something that could be either a breath of fresh air or not necessarily? It's just a different newness to it. Like, what kind of blame does McCarthy have regarding the way that the team responded or failed to respond?
I've told you a lot. I've carried a lot of water for Mike. I maintain that he's the most successful Cowboys coach in the drought, in my mind, with all due respect to Bill Parcells. And Bill accomplished something different. He helped kind of resuscitate them after the early part of the 2000s when they were truly lost at sea, and kind of at least got them, back, following some sort of North Star. But McCarthy took them to the playoff. No coach had taken them to the playoffs in consecutive seasons in the entire drought. He did it 3 years in a row. And he did it in the middle of everything we outlined at the beginning, all these contractual disputes, the injuries to his quarterback. I mean, I know that we all believe that, he was just this like dude on the, wagon that Aaron Rodgers was driving. But despite the fact that we've learned a lot about Aaron Rodgers in the last few years, we're still, as a football society, unwilling to give this man credit for any accomplishment. Like there's nothing that anyone is willing to give Mike any semblance, any morsel of. And so I think he was very, very good for the Cowboys. I think you can certainly argue that a change was needed, that maybe things had just kind of run their course. Their 3 playoff losses were horrific. Even though they lost to, a Niners team twice that we all regard in quite high esteem. I think we all believe this Niners team as of late would have maybe been a little dynasty if not for the existence of the Chiefs. And yet we still don't kind of give the Cowboys that bit of right. The point there is, we're all willing to say, man, the Bills and Ravens are awesome. They just keep running into the Chiefs. That's just really unfortunate for them. But we don't offer that same benefit to the Cowboys because they're the Cowboys. And I get that. But so that being said, I maintain that it's difficult to kind of evaluate the end of McCarthy because last year they did absolutely nothing. I mean, their big additions, and I'm not exaggerating, to their roster were Eric Kendricks, who agreed to terms with the 49ers before then, and Zeke Elliott. That was it. They let all these players walk. And they let Mike and his staff go at this in a contract year. I mean, they really kind of sandbagged him. So, and even in spite of that, Dak Prescott, missed over half the season, and he still had them, again, kind of, being hooked up to life support, but still in playoff contention.
They were competitive,
in the middle of December. And so that was really impressive to me. And so I have a hard time saying he was a failure because last year he was kind of fighting with one arm tied behind his back. But and I think the way that they handled his departure is kind of proof of that. And so he certainly had a hand in the failures. I don't mean to be long-winded and ignore that, but he was one part of a problem. He certainly is not the primary infection that has plagued this team for a while.
And look, we'll find out. I mean, because whenever you make coaching changes, a lot of the time you don't know how it's going to work out. And sometimes it's the worst thing you could have ever done.
Right.
You look back and you realize, well, that guy was actually a lot better than we gave him credit for. And maybe that's what'll happen, but maybe it won't. Maybe because they have made some moves this season that they didn't make, or this offseason that didn't make last offseason, and health being definitely a lot better. And we could talk about that. So how is the health coming into camp? Because last year, the team lost 4 defensive ends to injury in the first 5 games of the season. Prescott got hurt. The DBs got hurt. Blandon Diggs. So how are the injuries coming into camp right now?
Yeah, I think for the most part they're really healthy, and that's people. Obviously, big topic right now is what questions do you have around camp, and I think we're all interested to see how they approach Dak, how much work he gets, how many veteran days off he gets, et cetera, et cetera. But offensively, they're pretty solid. I'd say the only question is in the secondary. Whether or not Trayvon Diggs starts on the PUP list remains to be seen. We'll obviously have that answer in short order. But he's coming back from injury, and it's worth noting that on Thursday, the Dallas Morning News reported that Diggs did not meet the minimum threshold for off-season workout attendance with the team specifically. He did do his own personal, regimen, but the contract states the Cowboys have a right to rescind some money from his contract, so they did. They deducted him $500,000. So. A little bit of a writing on the wall situation in my mind, at least, that maybe this is Trayvon's last season with the Cowboys, but that's a different subject entirely. But he is kind of a health question mark, as is Savon Ravel, obviously, who the Cowboys took in the 3rd round. I know you and I discussed him. Injured last year, barely played in the college football season at East Carolina, and obviously had a lot of hype and whatnot. And people regarded him as a first-round type talent, if not for the injury. But we don't know what he's going to do in terms of if he will be on the PUP list as well. So those are the only kind of ones outside of, obviously, DeMarvion Overshown, who had the horrific injury late last year. People throw out Thanksgiving as a potential return date for him, but you know how that goes. It is always just kind of a wait and see thing, but obviously very clearly not a part of training camp in the early part of the season.
Okay, so Diggs, Ravel, and Overshown, with Overshown the definite one that we will not see at least until, like you said, maybe Thanksgiving at the earliest.
Right.
Okay. All right. I did want to ask you, we'll start on offense. I did want to ask you about the offensive coordinator, the new guy, even though Shadi's going to be calling plays, Clayton Adams. We talked about him. And you do believe that this hire, and especially since Shadi, like when we look back at his career, where he stands out the most is his ability to be more of a running coordinator, somebody that can get the most out of your team in the ground game. And with this hire by Adams, do you think that that's what that maybe will trigger? Because people will look at the roster, they'll look at this depth chart here, and they'll go, well, they just got Pickens and Lamb, and of course Prescott's going to be healthy. Ferguson's back. Oh, they're just going to be chucking it. It's going to be 50 passes a game. How do you think that's going to work? And do you think Adams was brought in here to help out the run game? What's your best take?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, first of all, to follow any kind of breadcrumbs with Schottenheimer, because he's been the offensive coordinator here for 2 years. Didn't call plays. He had a cup of coffee with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, things were very volatile there, so kind of difficult to discern. Was a play caller with the Seattle Seahawks. That's something he talks about a lot.
Yeah.
But was kind of butting heads with Russell Wilson in the let Russ cook era, etc. But is a disciple of Pete Carroll, who obviously loved to run the ball. And better than I do his time with the New York Jets.
Yeah.
In the run to the conference championships they had. LaDainian Tomlinson, Sean Green,
Thomas Jones.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So just this kind of amalgamation of people and contributors. So it stands to reason that they want to do that. But, very oftentimes I think we look at a team in free agency in the offseason and say, like, well, these are their moves, and they clearly represent, what they want to do. If the Cowboys had gone out and signed a bunch of interior linemen, or if they had been the biggest spender at running back, or if they drafted a running back even with a top 100 pick, we would sit here and we would say, yeah, that makes sense. And I actually hearken back to something Mike McCarthy said in 2023, which was at the NFL Combine, right after the Cowboys had moved on from Kellen Moore, and Mike had announced he was going to take over play calling duties. If you recall, he had a quote that was something, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, Kellen just wants to light up the scoreboard. I want to run the ball. And everybody just freaked out and assumed that Mike was going to go back to the wishbone and just like this archaic, running the ball 50 times a game. And this dude is not in no way a modern coach, blah, blah, blah. Only for us to get to the 23 season and for Dak Prescott to finish second in MVP voting, and for CeeDee Lamb to, set every individual receiving record in Dallas Cowboys franchise history. So I don't know that Schottenheimer is bluffing, but, the math doesn't necessarily make sense, because we mentioned the crew that the Jets had going on when he was there under Rex Ryan. I mean, with all due respect, I don't think Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders and Jaden Blue, kind of match up. Even if we disregard who LaDainian Tomlinson is and was as a player, this is a very, kind of ho-hum, running back room. And so like, if you had to guess right now who leads the team in carries or production, I don't think you could. I mean, I think we'd probably go like Javonte or Miles Sanders just because, but so it's difficult to feel like they're going to just run the ball at will. I think they want to obviously have a semblance of a run game, but the Cowboys have just, they were on one end of the spectrum, spending the 4th overall pick and doubling down with the Zeke contract, and then went to the other end of the spectrum as far as devotion to the running back position. The position doesn't matter. I know the internet feels that way, but it does a little bit. You have to care about it a teeny amount. And the Cowboys still aren't devoting quite enough resources there, in my opinion, but maybe they're banking on the pass game, being so efficient with the addition of George Pickens that it opens things up for whoever's running the ball.
And they did draft Booker. And that also tends to think that is more of we're going to try to ground and pound a little bit.
That's the one thing. You're right. I mean, certainly, but they did also see Zach Martin retire, right? Sure. I mean, so there is a bit of, I mean, there is some of that there. I have a very difficult time, discerning where this run game production is going.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Sanders is intriguing because up until this last year there with Carolina, which was such a big disappointment, I kind of liked what I saw out of him out of college and into the pros, and he had the big year with the Eagles, and I thought everything was going really fine for him. And then I don't know what happened in Carolina, but then again, a lot of bad happened in Carolina that year as well, even though, of course, last year things did start to get better. I get that. And maybe when you get a big contract for the first time, there's that. So he is the one that intrigues me the most because I can see a bounce back from Sanders because I didn't really look at him as some sort of Williams hasn't shown us anything in the NFL. At least Sanders has shown us something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm way more willing to believe, and I think you are too, that Sanders, had the benefit of running behind the Eagles' offensive line that we know to be great. But certainly talented, even back to your point in his days at Penn State. Yep. Javonte Williams may be involved in the passing game. I don't know. It's the Cowboys have a lot of fans, and so you get a lot of different types of people. There's obviously a big Venn diagram that captures Cowboys fans with Texas Longhorn fans. So you have a lot of people who just really believe that Jaden Blue is going to be the guy. And sure. I certainly think he'll be involved to some degree, but he just doesn't have the physical frame, obviously. And we've seen that play out with Deuce Vaughn, obviously. Phil Maffa is intriguing to me, obviously a bigger back, and certainly had a lot of production at Clemson. But again, I mean, if you told me one of these dudes carries the ball 200 times this year, I just don't know who that is right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to predict.
Probably would have to do with injuries if that's going to happen. Right. Otherwise, that probably won't. Okay, so sticking on offense, let's talk about, and I'll ask you the same questions here on defense. So what about, give us a good camp battle on offense that we need to keep an eye on. Cowboy fans out there going to training camp, and what should they be keeping an eye on?
I don't think there's anything super sexy, right? Like, I think it's pretty chalk at the top, but I think things that are interesting that I'll be paying attention to at least are Luke Schoonmaker, second round pick a couple years ago out of Michigan. I know you're a big fan.
Yes.
Just it hasn't hit for the Cowboys, and Jake Ferguson is kind of that dude, so there's not really room for that. Brevin Spann-Ford is a name that has just kind of popped and floated at different times. He had one of the biggest UDFA signing bonuses last year across the NFL. That's the one area where the Cowboys will, open the purse strings is an undrafted free agency and bid for guys. And so it was very clear and obvious that they really, really valued Brevin Spann-Ford. And so is he able to leapfrog Luke Schoonmaker, become a viable part of things? I don't know, but that is a point of interest for me. And also, I think it's safe to assume the Cowboys call it 6 receivers, right? So we've got CD, Pickens, Jalen Tolbert. There's 3. Kevontae Turpin, if you want to count him, we're now at 4. And it gets a little bit interesting here because Ryan Flournoy was a draft pick last year. Jalen Brooks was a draft pick 2 years ago. Okay, like maybe that's one of your other spots. Now we're up to 5. There is some question. I think people wonder, is Jonathan Mingo's spot totally safe? I mean, we forget, but this is his first training camp with the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And been acquired at the deadline last year. So
that's a valuable pick too.
I mean, believe me, we're well aware.
I know.
But yeah, like before the George Pickens trade, obviously it was, like he's going to make the team just from a quantitative standpoint. But I don't know that I feel, I went from like 100% guarantee makes the team, maybe down to like 85, which is still significant, but it at least invited questions. If somebody is able to pop, Treshaun Holden is a UDFA that has gotten some buzz as well. Like, is there, my point is, I don't think you have to squint like with all of your might to see a world where Jonathan Mingo is cut by the team. I don't think that they're that bold, to be clear. Like that they're pretty arrogant and pretty stubborn. So I think they'll hold to the fact that they traded for him, but it is worth mentioning at least.
Okay. And what about Brooks? Does Brooks have the talent from what you saw last year, which was a, second year from a rookie. So is he ready now? Do you think there's a chance that he could have a really good camp and then maybe try to win that 4th job?
I think that Brooks is a talented receiver, but I think he is kind of fallen into the same trap that plagued Jalen Tolbert. Tolbert was drafted in 2022, obviously like a month after the Cowboys traded away Amari Cooper. And so he came in and it was a matter of, we need you to be this guy. And it just was incredibly unfair to ask of him. And so it didn't work that rookie season in 2022. And then in 2023, his second year, they traded for Brandon Cooks. And so that relegated him down to this third tertiary role where he kind of thrived a little bit more. And last year, with Cooks dealing with injuries, he was asked to kind of, carry the load, become that secondary guy. And in his third NFL season, that was a fair question, but he just couldn't do it. And Brandon Cooks was injured. And so obviously the Cowboys were stuck, traded for Mingo. That didn't work, et cetera. Now we're here. So I think that's kind of happened with Jalen Brooks. Last year, he was kind of asked to be that third guy with Brandon Cooks dealing with injuries. And then with Tolbert not really living up to anything. And I think he's a serviceable player. I just don't know that he's quite ready for that responsibility. Okay. And so, is time running out? I mean, he's a 7th round pick from 2 years ago now.
Yeah, it is.
That new car smell does, fade away after a certain time.
And that's why you bring in guys like Holden. And maybe if he has a good camp and Brooks is not developing, it's time to move on. Right. What about the offensive line? Is it set for sure? Does Cornelius have a chance at all? Are there any questions regarding jobs on the offensive line, either as a starter or as a key reserve?
Nothing in my mind. It all is pretty chalk, especially after drafting Tyler Booker. The only thing that I'm going to pay a modicum of attention to is at one point, I believe it was during the draft, right after the draft, Schottenheimer, it was after the draft, was fielding a question about Tyler Booker not, getting every snap with the ones, and was talking about we're working guys in whatever. So we're moving dudes around, and he kind of listed some guys off, and he said, we're moving Cooper Beebe around. Again, I just kind of perks your ears a little bit, like, why are you moving him around? Isn't he your starting center? Sure. I don't know. It's difficult to envision where would you play Cooper Beebe then, because you're not moving Tyler Smith, you're not moving Tyler Booker, obviously. Beebe would have made sense as an interior lineman. Brock Hoffman is a capable center, but again, if you don't have a home for Beebe, then I don't know why you would. Only, strange. I mean, if we're really trying to figure out how the puzzle fits, maybe you move Cooper Beebe to guard and you kick Tyler Smith out to tackle. If you're really committed to this, I just don't think that they are at this point in time. It was just a comment that caught my attention.
Okay. And I like Cornelius, and we talked about that. So is there an opportunity, do you think, in 2026 for him to be the starting right tackle?
26 is a fair thing. It's probably the last year of Terrence Steele. Even with that said, though, I don't think that it's a situation where they're abandoning him, at right tackle right now. I think that I don't even know that Cornelius is the swing tackle right now. I think that's probably Austin Richards. But yeah, I think right tackle is definitely up for grabs in 2026, and he'll be in the mix.
Okay. Let's now talk. Oh, by the way, Milton is clearly the number 2, right?
I would say he is, from the standpoint of what they paid to get him, right? Yeah. Or that they paid something to get him. And especially, I would offer also, it doesn't really matter, right? Like,
unless there's an injury. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like in this third quarterback rule, like they're going to carry 3 quarterbacks, and how they list them is TBD. But I mean, they're all making the team in my estimation, and obviously they'll all dress on game day.
Okay. Defense. So Matt Eberflus takes over. How do you see that being different? What are the differences that you think we're going to have to keep an eye on this training camp?
I know we've talked about this before, but Matt Eberflus has sort of been the defensive coordinator of the Cowboys before. They had 2 different coaches who were kind of holding that title when Rod Marinelli officially held the title. Matt Eberflus was the first, and then Chris Richard was the second when Eberflus left for the actual title with Indianapolis under Josh McDaniels and that whole thing, and Frank Reich. And so we've learned that we can set our watch by a great linebacker play happening under his watch, which is interesting given the DeMarvion Overshown injury. And it's also interesting, when Dan Quinn took over, he brought like 4 Falcons with him, that had played for him in Atlanta. The only player to follow Eberflus from Chicago was Jack Sanborn, who is a linebacker, just again, given his area of expertise. He played linebacker, for anyone who's unaware, at Temple and, whatnot. It is kind of the position he thrives with. I don't know that we're going to see anything exotically different. I don't know that, and I don't know that anybody wants to. just because everything's been so successful. The cornerstone elements of the defense are already kind of set in place. You got Micah Parsons. They were able to get a long-term deal done with Osa Odigizua. Dante Fowler is back after a year away with Dan Quinn in Washington. Trayvon Diggs, when present, is a cornerstone. Deron Bland, a cornerstone. This is, for a long time, the Cowboys treated safety the way they do contract extensions for superstar players, and they just had nobody's back there. But they've gotten tried and true legitimate safety play year after year, and Dan Quinn was a big reason for that. But Donovan Wilson and Malik Hooker are both kind of par for the course dudes in that sense. So I think everything is going to be fairly obvious along the defensive side of the ball. It's just a matter of who emerges. This Kaiir Elam turned into the player who he was at Gainesville that Buffalo thought they were drafting in the first round, or is he the player the Bills traded away? Can Kenneth Murray refine that fountain of youth, who everybody thought he was at Oklahoma when the Chargers drafted him? Like, there's all this stuff, these kind of questions. Does Savon Ravel play right away? There are some massive swings of the pendulum that can happen that can change this group dramatically.
Do you think that, because I know there are some people who believe that just by looking at the depth chart and knowing all the injuries and some of the concerns with the hit or miss secondary, that this is going to be a high scoring team this year? They're going to throw the ball a lot. Their defense is not really going to be able to stop people. They're going to get into a boatload of high-scoring games. They're going to be fun to watch, but that's basically the Dallas Cowboys in 2025. Do you believe that is overblown? Do you think the Cowboys have an opportunity to be a lot better on defense than some people think?
Yeah, I mean, they haven't been that group since Micah Parsons has been on the team. I know that we have assigned, rightfully so, a lot of that credit to Dan Quinn, but I mean, I would attribute it to some of these cornerstone players, right? Now, some of them have come and gone. DeMarcus Lawrence is one of them. But I mean, I just can't envision a world where Micah Parsons is literally rushing the passer every single down to where, are they a guaranteed top 5 unit? No, like, I wouldn't go that far. But I just can't imagine them. The last year they were like this was Mike McCarthy's first year when Mike Nolan was the defensive coordinator, and they were just getting, gassed on the defensive side of the ball each and every single week. And it required the offensive output to try to go shot for shot. And the Cowboys, unfortunately, were not able to do that. And then Dak got hurt. But I think that ultimately they're going to be a solid team in an overall sense.
Okay. And linebacker, though, does look like it's one spot with the overshown injury for sure. That it might be a little shaky if Kenneth Murray does not do anything more than what we've seen in the past, unless Jack Sanborn does a good job. Because I think Sanborn, I always liked him coming out of college. So, I think he's an interesting player. But as far as that secondary, yeah, I mean, again, I think the one thing that does stick out is Elam. He has not lived up to his draft billing, and that's why he's on the Cowboys, basically. So if he does not work out, and let's say Ravel needs a little bit more time, who can step up and play significant outside corner reps and hold the fort? Do they have that guy?
So I have an answer for this, and I don't mean to be dramatic, but if you'll excuse me for 1 minute, my dog is going crazy. Give me 1 second.
Go ahead and take care of your dog.
Interesting answer.
All right. So I want to remind everybody, too, that we're going to have, and I know any Cowboy fans watching probably just don't care about this at all, but we are going to be talking about the Washington Commanders at 2:00 Eastern today with David Harrison of Locked On Commanders podcast. So you want to stay tuned for that if you want to find out what's going on with the rival Washington Commanders. And you can find out what went on with the New York Giants with Ryan Dunleavy. I interviewed him just yesterday? The days just go by. And so actually, I think it was Wednesday. Yes, it was Wednesday. So that is available on our site over at Proline TV. So check that out. Link in the description, obviously. You can find out about all of the interviews that we're going to have, and we will definitely talk about the Philadelphia Eagles at some point in the next few weeks. But Giants already Wednesday, Cowboys right now, Washington Friday, and then Eagles at some point in the future. Okay, RJ's back.
Well, talking about the Eagles is a horrible idea, but yeah, if that corner is honestly the position where they have the most dramatic swing potential, because if Diggs is healthy and solid, if Deron Bland is solid, if Elam is that guy, then great. You've got your nickel guys and you're good to go. It is worth noting, you've obviously noted it here, I know we've discussed this, that they have DaRon Bland slated to play in nickel, which is where he was slated to play in 2023. Before Diggs tore his ACL, he had to kick outside and he had all the pick sixes. But this was where they envisioned him many moons ago. That nickel spot has had Jordan Lewis playing it for a very, very, very long time. And the dude who I think can come in and be the kind of pinch hitter isn't Kalen Carson, the second-year player, but it's probably Israel Mukuamu, who I know you have listed here as a safety, but he has played a lot of corner in the past. He's kind of a versatile dude that can come in. And so that's also, training camp is what it is. And I don't care about, quarterback performances. People will be like, oh, Jalen Hurts was 30 of 33 at training. I really could not care less about that. But what I care about is where players are being lined up, because we can obviously discern how the coaches envision on using them. And so I'm very interested to see how much work at corner Izzy Mukuamu is getting, because the safety position is a little bit log jammed and has been throughout his career. So if Elam isn't necessarily living up to billing, and again, Mukuamu has really only played nickel corner for the Cowboys in a pinch. But is there an amalgamation where they say, okay, plan A and B, those didn't work. Let's kick DaRon Bland outside. Let's put Izzy on the inside. And now we have a solid plan that we feel good about.
Look, I will say this, and I think this is important, especially knowing our scouts over at our lads and just what I've seen out of the kid. The Cowboys got themselves a steal in the third round with Revel. This kid's going to be a guaranteed long time number 1, number 2 corner for the Dallas Cowboys, barring health. As long as he's healthy, he's going to be just fine. As soon as you see him out there day one, starting with the Cowboys, he ain't coming off the field. So I think there's going to be a lot less to concern Cowboy fans with who may have some concerns. Maybe they already are excited about Rebel, but if some of them aren't, trust me, the kid's going to be the real deal.
I certainly believe that. And, it is just a matter of him getting fully healthy. And again, if you follow the money, which is obviously how you can tell a lot in the NFL, quite literally in this moment, we're a day removed from the report, as I mentioned from the Dallas Morning News, of the Cowboys fining Trayvon Diggs $500,000. You don't do that to a guy who you plan on having a long-term future with, right? We've never talked baseball. I don't know how well you follow Major League Baseball, but this past week, right, there was a Nathan Eovaldi story about the All-Star game and didn't make it, all this stuff, and the Texas Rangers, who I'm an Astros fan, so I really hate them, but they gave him his $100,000 bonus anyway. Just a good faith, goodwill. It's a guy who won the World Series for you, like guy who's a part of your program. Like you do that kind of thing for those players. And so you don't fine Trayvon Diggs $500,000, which is pennies relative to the salary cap in this world, if he's part of the long-term future. So again, there's clearly some vision of Trayvon Diggs is not going to be here in 2026. That is Savon Ravel's job. Once he's healthy, once Indiana Jones takes away the diamond, puts the sandbag in its place. And the other question within that is, does DaRon Bland get an extension now? He's eligible for a deal because everybody is on the Cowboys. And so do they take care of that now? We're obviously in a world where cornerback money continues to go up and up and up and up. So it would make sense to get ahead of this, but we've said that about many different positions the Cowboys ignore in the past.
Do you think then there's a world where if Ravel is healthier and plays right away than people are expecting and is right out there and ready to go, and Elam actually shows that I can play, I deserve to be out here and give me a shot, and he looked good in camp in the preseason, is there a world where they might trade Diggs at the deadline?
That's not generally their move. You can't really find an example of them doing that. I think that's a good question, right? Like if we were talking, about if we ran the Cowboys and we were laying out like, okay, if X, Y, and Z happen, we should be prepared to do A, B, and C. Like I agree with the thought process. I have a difficult time finding a historical moment where that actually happened because they don't do that. That requires some foresight. That requires looking, to different things, whatever. and that's not their MO. But I think that makes sense to your point if you reach a place where Ravel is someone you can depend on, if Elam. But what I would offer as well, because I think, and I imagine you agree based on this conversation, that Diggs' days in Dallas are numbered.
Yeah.
But Deron Bland is currently entering the final year of his contract, as is Kaiir Elam, because they logically declined his 5th-year option that they had to pick up if they wanted to. So you've got those two players, which again really highlights, we can discern that they're moving on from Diggs in the near future, and both Deron Bland and Kaiir Elam are entering contract years. That it's very possible that the only dude on this paper, electronically, so a year from now when you and I are having this conversation, is Savon Ravel. It could be Savon Ravel and some first-round rookie or whatever, or some free agent signing. There is a world where right now the starting 3 corners for the Cowboys aren't even on the team next year.
Do you think Bland deserves, if they had to make the decision today, do you think he deserves to be around an extension?
I mean, I think he's a really good player, but I think he has a right to ask for market rate. He has the pick 6 record, even though it was 2 years ago, right? He's done a lot of different things for them. And I think
give it to him?
I would be in a position. I'm not like I'm a genius, I know everything, but I would be in a position where Micah was taken care of a year ago and Dak and CD were taken care of the year before. And so when this offseason began, my priorities would have been, let me get my extension done for Tyler Smith right away because he's eligible now, and let me get my extension done for Deron Bland. And I'd be comfortable paying a little bit more in March of this year, because I would have escapability on other things because I was proactive with regards to them. But at this moment in time where they still have a Micah deal to take care of. I would like them to take care of Tyler Smith. I would consider those higher priorities. And I would consider, even though I was against the trade, George Pickens a higher priority. He's currently set to enter the final year of his contract. And it's not visible on the screen, but Brandon Aubrey, their all-world kicker, is entering the final year of his deal. So relative to all those players and what they contribute and at their respective positions, I would say Deron Bland is probably priority number 5. So what I'm saying is I would have established a world where he was priority number 2 or 3 for me when the offseason began. I would have never procrastinated to this point.
Yeah. Okay. Give me a camp battle on defense. Who should we be keeping an eye on if there is one?
This does kind of, get the SEO sexy juices flowing. This is maybe like a first take topic, but like Mozzie Smith's job probably isn't safe. I know you're a Michigan man yourself, and so that's. But I know you're not shocked at this.
No, not
yeah. You're just. I mean, dude, it's year 3. Like you can't just hold this job because we want you to anymore. And the positional alignment is obviously relevant and matters, but as you obviously all have noted, Solomon Thomas was a free agency addition and acquisition by the Cowboys. You're talking somebody who himself was a first-round pick and a top first-round pick, and I don't know that he ever lived up to that, but it's still highly regarded, a savvy veteran.
Now, yeah, exactly. He's a good guy. He's a good locker room guy. Yeah,
exactly. And so I could totally see a world where, again, the 1 tech, 3 tech, things like that are critical and important matter, but where somebody just eats into Mozzie's playing time because it just hasn't hit. And
who could do that though besides Thomas? And you really don't want to have Thomas as a starter or somebody that is going to eat up a lot of snaps. So who could that possibly be?
I don't think it can be Jay Toia, obviously, a draft pick this year. We've seen the Cowboys. This was more under Dan Quinn, but get creative. Line Micah Parsons up there, right? Like we've seen them move bodies around and whatnot. Like I don't know that's within Matty Riflis's wheelhouse. I don't know that they have the personnel to make those types of moves and be that bold. But one of the only players who the Cowboys have cut before their rookie first-round contract ended was Taco Charlton. And for obvious reasons, this is very reminiscent of that. So like
another failed Michigan player.
Right. And they cut Taco, I believe, before week 3 of his 3rd season. So he didn't even finish out his 3rd season with the Cowboys. And so, again, not forecasting that future for Mozzie, but my point is, and a failed first round pick, not of this head coach, so granted he's been around and whatnot. So I do believe that there is maybe a bit of we're establishing a culture. You have to earn your spot. And I mean, of the starters you've listed, I would offer he's probably the one who's earned it the least, even counting Kenneth Murray as the starting middle linebacker. Like, I think Kenneth Murray deserves a bigger benefit of the doubt than Mozzie Smith at this point. So even though I don't have a good answer for like who would take over, the leash is that short. I mean, to be quite honest.
What it does look like, a strength-wise for this team, it looks like that the edge, and that's real important, obviously, especially when you're running a 4-3 defense. And I'm a big Ezaraku guy. We talked about that, and I know he's not the biggest dude, and that's the reason why he lasted to the second round. But once the scouts saw him in person, and then it looked at his tape and everything like that, the kid can play. And I think that could, and now you got to get Nealon, of course, healthy for the season, and Sam Williams healthy. So is that what is the hope? And then Peyton Turner, another potentially failed first-round draft pick. So is there a hope that that's what this defense is going to rely on, is a really good pass rush?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you mentioned you can be excited about almost every name that they have, right? And there's high pedigree there, obviously. Micah Parsons speaks for himself. Dante Fowler. You mentioned Peyton Turner, and I think he's probably the biggest wild card on the team, right? Like there are a number, as you all do a great job of exemplifying, of offseason additions to this team, certainly relative to this time last year, right? You've got all sorts of free agents, even if they're lower tier and whatnot, but still new faces, fresh faces, and obviously lots of draft picks. And Peyton Turner is kind of the name that everybody forgot about. Like everybody's more excited about Solomon Thomas even, or Kenneth Murray, because he was a trade acquisition. But, I would offer that Peyton Turner is now what Dante Fowler was a couple of years ago for the Cowboys. Dante Fowler had a nice moment with the Rams, but hadn't lived up to billing with the Jaguars. And Dan Quinn brought him in. People don't really recall this or remember this because they were together. I mentioned Gainesville earlier, at Florida, at the University of Florida. That's Dan Quinn was his coach there. And so just kind of brought him in, and he really thrived with the Cowboys in that stint and parlayed it into a deal with the Commanders and followed Dan Quinn there and obviously came back. And so you can kind of see Peyton Turner being that guy. The Cowboys also had that a little bit to a degree with Carl Lawson last year, who we talked about at the time. So they've done a good job of kind of finding these veteran dudes who just didn't work for somewhere. I think we're all willing to give anyone who's been with New Orleans the last few years some grace. Sure. But so, okay, I mean, like, I feel like I'm casting a really wide net. That's how pass rusher feels. You're going to get some return, whether it is with Peyton Turner or Fowler or Marshawn Nealon in year 2, Sam Williams coming back from the ACL. Obviously, Micah's going to be Micah. So they have a platoon of guys who they're going to be able to work with, and that certainly is exciting. And that doesn't even include Donovan Ezeuaku. And thankfully, his contract situation was taken care of on Thursday.
Yeah. I think the rest of the second-round draft picks, I know a lot of the GMs are happy about that.
Right.
So Williams and Nealon, though, because you didn't mention them, so they're okay. They're ready to roll.
Yeah, I mean, Nealon is a second-round pick, so he's still got some of that bump. This is a contract year for Sam Williams, and he's never quite lived up to anything special. Yeah. He is coming back from a torn ACL. He's had some. I hesitate to call them knucklehead moments, but he's had some moments that, were slightly annoying to people. So it does kind of feel like this might be his last year. So playing for a new contract across the league, you don't know. But to the overall point, it is going to be difficult for all these dudes to get snaps, for all these dudes to find time. And I would say that if we did kind of prioritize them, Sam Williams might be at the bottom of that list, unfortunately. But he is a talented player, and so if he's your sixth option, I mean, again, it is a rich person problem, so to speak.
Are there any players, because we talked about contracts and stuff, are there any potential players that still, like, if we get towards a certain part of camp, that the Cowboys contractually would be like, now that this younger, cheaper kid has proven himself, we can get rid of this more expensive kid?
I mean, I don't know that there's anyone that would like shock me, in that way. There's maybe Sam Williams is that guy. A few years ago, the Cowboys traded, was it Kelvin Joseph for Noah Igbenogany? Just kind of a player for player trade. And one corner for another. I mean, you don't see that happen all too often. Like, I could see it being that situation. Maybe there's a team out there that can give Sam Williams more snaps, more reps, whatever. And if Dallas feels shy at running back or whatever, I don't know. Like, okay, if you're playing Madden, Sam Williams is probably the most movable asset in that sense. maybe you cross your fingers and hope that somebody's still in love with Mozzie Smith and you can move him. But other than that, I don't really see any kind of world where they trade anybody like that. And maybe the answer is a receiver too. I know you're obviously talking about defense, but maybe it's Jonathan Mingo or something. Those are the places where they have a little bit of a surplus at the moment. Or Luke Schoonmaker, right? Like, just kind of he might be that guy. Like, he's still not far removed. Maybe, a lot of people when Miami was looking for a tight end, thought that after the Jonnu Smith trade or whatever, a lot of people, were like, maybe this is the home for Luke Schoonmaker, and then Darren Waller happened. So,
well, I guess we would. I mean, just those players alone there, just especially those Michigan players, we might have to take a look at. Maybe Mike McDonald. Might have to take a look at Harbaugh with Schoonmaker.
That's a really good idea. And I think people would love that, obviously. And how it is. People will just want to get something, for what they feel like is nothing. But
even if it's a draft pick, whatever.
But that is those connections don't always exist, right?
No.
Like where you have those coaches who coached them at the collegiate level 5 minutes ago. That isn't always. You're generally looking for he was his coordinator here, where whatever, like Robert Saleh trading for some Jets or something like that. But that is a good comp.
Yeah, that's because if someone like McDonald, I know how to get the most out of Mozzie Smith. Then because I pretty sure that was I think it was his year after, but still he coached them. Okay. Give me any breakout players on the team that you think is ready to take a next step. There might be a bunch of fantasy fans out there that want to know this question. So anybody that you think is capable of breaking out, offense or defense?
I think because you framed the question from a fantasy angle, okay. I don't know how much fantasy you play. I mean, I
have a dynasty team.
Right. So, but if you're doing a redraft league, you've got to pay a premium for CeeDee Lamb. There's just no question. And maybe you're not comfortable, and maybe you'd prefer Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. I'm not going to knock you for that. People are going to reach on George Pickens because big name, big team, etc. But the values, in my opinion, are Jake Ferguson and Dak Prescott, specifically Dak, because you'll get the people in your league that are like, oh, he sucks, Cowboys suck. We're talking fantasy here. Like that's the game. And you're going to get a top 10 quarterback from a fantasy standpoint again. And Jake Ferguson, a top 10 tight end. He's not going to be peak vintage Travis Kelce or anything like that, but he is going to catch, 6 to 8 touchdowns, probably have 800 to 900 yards. Like, he's a productive player when Dak Prescott is under center. So those are the ones, like, let your league mates chase Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. Like, let them pay the premium, just stack receivers and running backs at the top, and then come back later and take Dak Prescott and feel pretty pleased about yourself. I would not touch running back. I would not touch any single one. Just, I have Miles Sanders in my dynasty league just from the past.
Sure.
And I feel awkward about it. I don't know what to do with him. So it's a tough spot.
He's going to be available late, so that's not bad. If you want to, we're always looking for those late diamonds.
Yeah, like your last pick, right before you grab your defense and your kicker. I mean, you want to throw a dart at one of these running backs, by all means, but I wouldn't pay any legitimate price for it.
No. Okay, so the Cowboys will start off week 1 against the Eagles. Will kick off the entire season, so the NFL season. So what do you think about, I know we're a long way off from there, but what do you think about that kind of matchup to start the season for the Cowboys?
We haven't gotten, I'm sure you're aware of this, but a Dak Jalen Hurts game, really. I mean, we got one in 2021. It was week 3. It was early on Monday Night Football, and the Cowboys just blasted them. That was also the weekend of the Ryder Cup, so it was just great time for all of America's teams. And then we got one 2 years ago, and the Cowboys just blasted them. The Eagles had kind of checked out over the second half of that season. So it just hasn't really, it's always been Jalen's hurt or Dak is hurt. It's just been these weird kind of unfortunate coincidences. So obviously very exciting. I think the line is still 6.5, depending on where you look.
Yeah. We got 7 here at one place. So yeah.
I am not telling you I say this often to you, like, the Cowboys are not winning the Super Bowl. That's not my point, but they are not that team. They are not 7-point underdogs against the Eagles. Dak Prescott has more often than not succeeded against the Eagles, and I trust that to be the case here. I like the Cowboys schedule early. I mean, obviously, things happen, but after that game, they come home and host the New York Giants and then go to Chicago and play the Bears. Like I certainly envision a world where they're off to a 2-0 start, potentially, maybe get to 3-0, depending on how Chicago is, Ben Johnson, how long all that kind of takes to click for them. But I don't mean this word as some sort of homer. I think this line is disrespectful. The same way, like, most books have the Cowboys over under for win totals at 7.5. That's just absurd to me. Like, again, not like, how dare you hate my favorite team, or how dare you have this so low, blah, blah. They do not win fewer than 8 games, not only under Dak Prescott, but ever. I used to say this stat all the time, that Tony Romo never played a game where he was mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. And that's true. Like, you can look it up, and some of that is he got hurt at the right time for that stat to be true. But that never happened. They're always a team that is in the thick of it. Even last year, they won 7 games with chaos, with the house being on fire, and with anacondas, along the staircase, and, Bowser, banging on the door. Like, I mean, they still won 7 games. So you mean to tell me that they're not going to, go north of 7.5 this year? I think that's my favorite bet. If you are doing that for the Cowboys, it's absurd to me. It has moved a little bit over the offseason, but
yeah, because right now it's at minus 160. So they're telling you that they're hoping that you'll go with the 8.5, take the 120.
I'd take over 8.5 even, because
sounds like it to me. Yeah.
I don't put you in this box, obviously, but nationally, again, this is not a woe are the Cowboys type thing, but they're such a meme that, like, they don't get evaluated and discussed objectively without somebody screaming and saying, oh, they haven't won the Super Bowl and blah. Like, yeah, like, if you want to hate on this team, like, get in line behind me. Like, I have a long list, and I'll give you lots of material to work with. But the idea that they're, you used the word mediocre earlier. And not to, like, strongly disagree. Sure. They haven't been mediocre. They've been really good. They've just had their worst moments on the worst possible days. But as far as regular season success, they are near the very top of the NFL. And people can laugh at that and roll their eyes. And again, I'm right there with you. But if we're talking about putting your money down, they are definitely a team. I would even take over 9.5 at this point. Like, they are in an NFL world with 17 games. I mean, that's a little bit riskier, obviously, but the 8.5 is easy money in my mind.
Wow. And again, that's if the team stays healthy.
Sure. Obviously, not accounting for any disaster. Right. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. That's excellent to know. It's why we have you on, RJ. That's huge. Of course, I'd like to take the little snippets too, like this little 4-minute segment. I'm going to definitely pump that out at some point, just to let everybody know that who is interested in wagering, which a lot of people are, that maybe taking the Cowboys at over 7.5, over 8.5, over 9.5 win total is probably a pretty good idea based on what you just said, RJ. Okay, so give me, do you have some sort of prediction? If I know it's early, but sometimes it's late. I know a lot of people like to make predictions like in April. So do you have, like, some sort of prediction on what you think the Cowboys are going to do this season if everything is equal and healthy and all that?
I think they're a playoff team. Is this the year that an NFC East champion finally repeats? I don't know. Obviously, if a team was going to do it, it's going to be these Eagles, right? They're that good. But again, multiple things can be true, and that the Eagles can be one of the best teams in the NFL, and that the Cowboys play them well.
Sure.
So I don't envision a world where, they're a team that gives the Cowboys fits. If all is well, if all is healthy, I certainly think they're winning somewhere between 10 and 11 games. Whether or not that's good enough for the division obviously remains to be seen, but in all likelihood is good enough for a playoff spot. And then I think, it all depends on the draw for this team, right? If, they've had the misfortune, as we talked about, the last time they lost to San Francisco, as an example, and I don't say this to weaken anything the Eagles have done, that same divisional weekend, the Eagles played the Daniel Jones-led Giants, to get to the NFC Championship game. And then in the NFC Championship game, saw Brock Purdy, and every quarterback on the Niners roster get hurt and just put things on cruise control to get to the Super Bowl. I promise this is not in the poor Cowboys way, but, like, they just haven't caught that luck. You know what I mean? They haven't caught that luck on a playoff path where, and you hate to put it that way, you never want to see players get hurt, but they've never drawn that team that wasn't supposed to be there and been lucky to get them in the divisional round. They've just, they've always spun the wheel and landed on, the big bad wolf. You know what I mean? Every time that they're in a serious moment, and they just haven't been good enough. And that's on them fully and totally. They should have been. But
you're paying for the 90s, man. That's what you're paying for.
Right.
It's coming back.
So like if we forecast a world where, I don't know, the Panthers win the NFC South and then, they win a wild card game and that's the team who Dallas gets. Team. Yeah. Like that. I think if that kind of road lines up for them, anything's possible because it's possible for any team. But I think they're one of those teams. Like they're a 10 to 11 win team. They have the most important boxes checked at quarterback, wide receiver, pass rusher. Clearly, Brian Schottenheimer is the biggest question mark.
Yep.
I did a video a few weeks ago with a friend of mine and just kind of said, what's the thing that we're not seeing right now that we might look back in a month and be like, holy crap, like that was right in our face. Like we really should have, known that this was going to get bad. And we just didn't want to see it. And he was like, well, like Brian Schottenheimer could suck. Like this could be really bad.
Yeah.
This could be exactly what we thought it was for a month before he started to ooh and ah us in his press conferences. And so obviously if things go that way, it goes south, but that has not really happened to this team in 30 years. For all the failures that, again, you want to put on their head, and you should, I will lay them out for you. They are not a team that bottoms out. They're not a flat out embarrassment. They embarrass themselves in more ways than we can conceive, but they do not fail in just dramatic football fashion like they did last year. And a lot of these people, a lot of national heads, a lot of sports books, they say like, oh, look, this team sucked last year. Yeah, they did. And I will be the first to tell you that. But they also did quite literally nothing in the offseason. And they sent their head coach into a contract year. And they played the contract drama with their quarterback and their wide receiver. And their owner was on the radio fighting with local hosts, and whatnot. Like they made it as toxic of a year as possible for all parties involved and still won 7 games. So I like their odds in a general sense, but because it hasn't happened in 30 years, I'm certainly not going to predict them doing the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah. I think what it is like you said, because those are the law of averages that we all have to play. And so that's why it makes a lot of sense. Because yes, like you said, the two things that you have to if you're going to make this wager is Dak's health, which you can't control. But the one thing that nobody knows is, like you said, if for some reason Schottenheimer is a complete disaster, then that could be the thing that was there right in front of our eyes. That was a warning. But again, I think the law of averages tell you that you shouldn't worry about that, like you said, because you have to go all the way back. I'm just looking at it right here. You have to go all the way back to, let's see, they had just one. They had the 4-win season in 2015.
Even if an important year for the Cowboys was 2006. That was the year that Tony Romo took over as starter halfway through. And so since they've had a franchise quarterback, which is now almost 20 years worth of data, they have bottomed out 3 times. In 2010, when Tony Romo broke his collarbone and they were a disaster, and that
6-win team,
that led to them firing Wade Phillips midway through, and then Jason Garrett got the job. 2015, in which Tony Romo broke his collarbone again in week 2, and they went 4-12, and were still in the thick of the division because it was so bad, obviously throughout the entire course. And
that was Matt Castle, by the way.
Well, Matt Castle and Brandon Whedon, and Kellen Moore was a disaster. That was 2015. 2020, when Dak Prescott broke his ankle, and again, still won 6 games, still were kind of in the mix. And then last year, when Dak Prescott got hurt. So you're talking about 4 years across effectively 20 that they have been beneath 8 wins. Again, not a brag, not a flex. And they all involved the franchise quarterback suffering a season-ending injury in the first half of the season, which is the case for multiple teams. Not everybody can have the Nick Foles run or whatever. And so, again, is it a lock? No, but there's a lot of data to support that they're going to win somewhere between 8 to 10 games, be a playoff team. And if Lady Luck smiles upon them, maybe everything works out.
Well, RJ, you sold me. I don't know. I think maybe I'll see if you'll sell Jim Feist, our partner here, because he's really big into this. I know he had a lot of questions about the Cowboys. So maybe after he watches this, which he will, you'll have someone in your corner there as well. I'm sure you will, but I'll leave it up to Jim. RJ, I appreciate it as always. We're going to have links in the description where you could follow RJ at all of his work with bloggingtheboys.com, including social media, all of that. How often are you doing the shows now, RJ?
Now that training camp's here, I would say at minimum 3 times a week, sometimes 4, depends. You know how it is. The Micah deal will happen, obviously, at some point, and it will be way more than it had to be. And we'll say that in our breaking news show about it, and we'll kill them, and then we'll cope ourselves into, finding the way they actually won the deal. We're masochists deep down. Like, that's my kind of closing thought is, so many people think the Cowboys have bandwagon fans. Who would sign up for
yeah.
like who would want this? I mean, this isn't, there's no bandwagon, situation happening here. This is a curse that we all wear.
And like you said, the schedule, even if something happens where they do lose to the Eagles, there are other defending champs, Giants and Bears after that. Maybe they can get off to a good start. The schedule is not bad. So we'll see whether or not we have an opportunity to talk to you at some point with that schedule. Maybe just targeting, hey, here's one. Maybe the week of October 5th when the Cowboys go to take on my New York Jets. That'll be a good week for us to talk again.
My wife and I were going to go to that game. My son is 3.5 years old. We just ultimately decided, you know what? We're not going to invite that stress and take a 3.5-year-old to a game. So maybe once he's 4, we'll do that. But we are going to the Florida Georgia game this year, so I'm excited. College football, awesome. A little bit rowdier element. I think he'll enjoy that a lot. So
yeah, absolutely, that's awesome. Then he's going to have a nice little childhood. I like that.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So again, great job, RJ. I look forward to talking to you during the season. Hopefully, if we do talk that week, hopefully we're both feeling good about it. Our Jets and Cowboys are off to a great start. And we can have a really fun time with that. So as always, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, Jack.